have some of the executive committee. Got it. I think we have our last few presenters now able to join us, get into the room. So thank you. Let's wait maybe a few more seconds. I see some folks still filing in to the meeting, and then we'll get started with the presentations, and we'll have some time for questions afterward. So stand by. We'll start in just a minute. All right, we're approaching 3 after the hour. I see a solid set of folks here. Some longtime contributors, some new faces. So why don't we get started? And we are recording this, great. So my name is Josh Hadro. I'm the managing director of the IIIF Consortium. I'm happy to welcome you here today to this IIIF community call. We do this roughly monthly. If you haven't joined us at one of these before, we try to do community calls, as I said, roughly monthly, covering different topics, often demos or new idea domains within the IIIF community, fleshing out new areas of exploration. And in this case, this is a little bit different. This is an update from the consortium governance mechanism. So specifically, there's something called IIIF Executive Committee, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But updating on some of the planning work and development of some ideas that group has been doing over the last 6 months or so, or a little bit longer than that. So there are a number of others who will be speaking today, and I'll let them introduce themselves as they kind of come to their section. But that's the agenda for today. And before we dive too deeply into the strategic planning elements, just a quick pause to cover some community announcements. I'll let Caitlin Perry do those, and then we'll dive into the deck.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Perry. I'm the Communications and Community Coordinator for IIIF-C. The only thing that I want to make note of today is just, if you're interested in being here today, then you are probably interested in attending our next online meeting, which will happen December 5th through 7th. That is fully remote. There's no in-person component. So hold those dates if you'd like to attend then. And I'll hand it back to Josh.
That's great. Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, and for those who maybe are newer to the IIIF community, just a bit more about the online meeting. So actually, before the pandemic, we as an organization made the explicit decision so we've for a long time had annual conferences. We just had a really successful annual conference in Naples, Italy. And we've also have a long history of in-person and online working meetings, but we made an explicit decision that while we wanted to continue the great work that we do at our in-person meetings, we also wanted to develop a pattern and a set of rituals around online explicit meetings. So trying to put a number of equitable mechanisms in place. So for folks who aren't able to join us in person, we also have a major event every year in that online meeting. And so as Caitlin said, that'll be December 5th through 7th. And we're beginning the process now of putting together the program and the conversation and community elements that'll feature, but save the dates and join us then. But all right, so that covers it for announcements. And otherwise, I think we will dive into the presentation we're going to make for today. So I will share my screen and I can handle the slide elements. So I, as usual, want to make sure everybody can see that. I guess somebody break in and tell me if there are any issues with this, but otherwise
Seeing
I'll
a lot of thumbs up.
Seeing a lot of thumbs up. Excellent. Thank you. So I will start. I'm going to do just the first few slides here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Tom Kramer from Stanford, who is our board chair, to go into some other details, and he'll hand it off from there. So as we've been advertising, this is an update on the IIIF strategic planning framework that we first presented on at the last online meeting that we did. So in December of 2022. And so that was really the kickoff of some of these pillars. And this is the first really major update on the work that different subgroups have been undertaking. But first, just stepping back a moment to give you some additional context. If you're maybe newer to the community, just to talk about the different elements and groups at play here. So the community of IIIF contributors and implementers is thousands of institutions around the world, hundreds of different folks working on software or digitization or all sorts of things that intersect with digital cultural heritage. But this is really an effort being spearheaded by the IIIF Consortium. So that is a subset of institutions that financially support the work of the IIIF Consortium staffers and provide some governance and other mechanisms to kind of steer elements of the community and support the work of different community groups and the technology groups. So the consortium, so the IIIF as a standard is now more than 10 years old at this point. Started out in kind of 2011, 2012, and developed from there as a specification and an idea. But the consortium itself was formally founded in 2015 by a set of 11 institutions. And so the success of the technology and the open standard idea was already self-apparent. And these institutions came together to provide both funding and structure and governance around this community and this idea. So started with those 11 institutions, and is now already up to 66. So in those 8 years, we've grown by sixfold the number of institutions that are deeply invested in this idea, and more are joining every year. So this is a map. If you've seen me present ever before, you've seen me talk about this, but it's something I'm really proud of. This is a map of what we know that the IIIF community looks like, although it is definitely missing dots here. So this is just another way of looking at that mix of the red dots on this map are the implementations that we know about, but the blue dots on this map are those formal IIIF consortium members who are financially supporting the work of the staff and some of these other efforts here too. And so we have elections every year. So the executive committee is a subset of those consortium member institutions. We have elections among the membership to every year we have rolling terms. And so every year we replace a few of these institutions, but the 2023 consortium executive committee is what you see here on the screen. It's a set of 13 institutions that have these staggered terms and are represented, and most, if not all of these institutions are represented here on the call today, and we meet monthly to continue the work of updating staff priorities as well as some of these strategic priorities that you'll hear about. So let me pause there. I will hand this over to Tom Kramer. Unless you would like to do something different, Tom, I'm happy to keep doing the slides, but just let me know.
Gosh, that'd be great. Thank you. I'll make a little beep noise. Good morning, good afternoon, happy Wednesday, everyone. My name is Tom Kramer. I'm the founder of IIIF, and I'm currently serving as the chair of the operating committee and the executive committee. And with that benefit of long-term perspective, Josh just went through the IIIF-C and the executive committee. There was a major, after we went through the initial organizing committee, there was a major changing of the guard on the executive committee, including new leadership within the executive committee. And one of the things that we started in 2022 last year was taking stock of how successful we had been, where we had plateaued, if there were major tendrils or desires that were still left untapped from the original IIIF formation period. And as Neil Fitzgerald, who is a treasurer and also on the executive committee, put it in one meeting, it's time for a new next steps document. We need to understand where we want to be going and how we should organize ourselves going forward. And as Antoine Isaac from Europeana put it in one meeting, it's time to pick new hills to climb, because we've been rather successful in climbing the ones we have, but there are still things that we would like to see achieved, and standing still is a recipe for irrelevance. So this is where the strategic framework came from. Josh, could you beep? Thank you. Last year, major activity of the executive committee was to begin brainstorming on what the elements of a new strategic plan would be and how that might look. So we had multiple brainstorming and ideation sessions. So throughout the first half of last year at the meeting in Boston, at the conference, and then some refinement following that. And basically, you can see some of the clusters where there were ideas around community development, technical development, partnerships with others, and revisiting the membership and financials, which seem to be keep coming up as recurring themes. By the end of last year at the working group meeting in December, we had refined these into a set of pillars that we felt fairly confident in. Josh, please advance. And we identified and distilled this into 4 key initiative areas. So the first was advocacy and leadership. IIIF has always been a brilliant and needs-based initiative for technical interoperability, but we really want to push forward and become global advocates for the benefits of interoperability to benefit research and cultural heritage. The second one was a cluster of a pillar around technical development, which was to expand what we're currently doing, also make sure that there is adequate, beautiful, and compelling software continues to flourish and people benefit from the technical advances that IIIF can bring. The third was a set of initiatives specifically around community development and support for scholars and researchers, and with annotations being an area of particular interest so that users and researchers are seeing benefit from the interoperability framework. And the fourth one is really revisiting the consortium and what it provides to the institutions and the individuals who are participating in our activities. And is there an opportunity to go back, revisit membership structure, and play more of a role? Please advance. The nice thing about these pillars is that they are intersecting and reinforcing. So advocacy and leadership really drives technical development, community development, as well as membership and value in the consortium. Whereas technical development helps co-evolve with community development and gives people compelling reasons to join. And likewise, community development has a reciprocal relationship with technical development and membership. And all of these things should add up to increasingly apparent and increasingly compelling stories about how and why people may participate within IIIF. Next slide. So some of the ideas that emerged in the brainstorming discussions beyond the general clusters. So for advocacy and leadership, there was a set of things that basically we want to increase the relevance and the visibility of IIIF in global discussions around the knowledge, international knowledge ecosystem. So that might entail things like working with major platforms like Internet Archive, Wikimedia, the European Open Science Cloud, pushing into 3D interoperability to see the same benefits that we've seen with image-based resources. The channels might be through blogs, articles, or presentations, and tapping thought leaders throughout. Next slide. In terms of technical development, what I believe, as do many of us, that really the main vehicle for people realizing benefit from IIIF is the development of new software solutions. That's what institutions and repository stewards of content, that's what they implement locally. That is how end users, researchers, and scholars make use of the digital content. New software can reach new markets, and if we were to simply increase the number of software systems that were IIIF compatible, we'd see a natural growth and evolution, expansion of the value of IIIF. So we see that in specific domains like 3D and maps. Advances around things like shared componentry could help everyone focus at higher levels of the stack. And what could we do to really foster and better support for the community of developers? Next slide. Thanks, Josh. IIIF, of course, is more than a technologists community and a community around the technology. So how do we have that bright line connection to the scholars and researchers who are using the materials that we have? And how do we do that beyond where we've had really great penetration? So with libraries, with museums and with increasingly with archives, especially in North America and in Europe. Can we extend out to new domains? Can we extend out to new geographies? Can we extend out to new linguistic groups? And part of this is going beyond the core value proposition, which many of us drew us into IIIF in the first place, is Deep Zoom. So this is where the focus on annotation and using the web as a vehicle, not just to get information, but to interact with information emerges. Next slide, please. And then the last one is really, how do we take that very healthy growth that Josh referenced, the 66 members, how can we turn that into 120 members or 600 members? Are there ways that we can really get much broader participation as well as a much more robust and sustainable ecosystem of institutions and individuals that are helping support IIIF and realize its value? A big part of that is helping get the word out, enriching the community, enriching the technology. But maybe there are some specific services and some specific benefits that we can identify and cultivate for institutions who choose to buy in, and hopefully many, many more institutions and at a lower membership fee and buy-in cost. Next slide, please. The way we see this developing organizationally is that the executive committee, the elected body from the institutions that have chosen to support IIIF financially, that really is the steering group and the coordinating body for the entire strategic plan. Within each of the pillars, there is a subcommittee that includes and is led by members of the executive committee, but can expand and extend beyond membership within the executive group. So if there are interested parties or people playing key roles, they might be on that task force or on that subgroup. And then within each pillar, we see a series of individual initiatives. So within the advocacy pillar, for example, and you'll hear more about this, we've identified 3 individual strands, and those strands would have 3 individual teams that we're really working to drive progress on those fronts. Next slide, please. And the last thing is we don't, for those of you who've been around for a while, you'll remember that we had a IIIF Next Steps document that lasted us 6, 7, maybe 8 years. And it served its purpose well. But what we'd really like to do is move from such a more regular cadence and annual process for assessing the needs of the community and the opportunities, and then codifying and ratifying those into teams of people who are doing deliberate expansion and focused work on key initiatives that will help IIIF achieve its goals. So we're looking at this annual cycle. So we're just at the cusp of Q2 and Q3 right now. We've just completed the annual IIIF conference where we had a very productive in-person executive meeting. For the next 3 months over the summer in the Northern Hemisphere, we're looking to drive work to completion. For the initiatives, we're also looking to assess and update. Are there new things that we should undertake, things that didn't make it onto the front burner that we identified from last year? Between Q3 and Q4, so before the end of the calendar year, we'd like to do updates, tie off the initiatives that are complete, and then also formulate updated plans for next year for 2024. Those would be reflected in our annual budget. And then starting in January, we would launch new goals with the new budget year, with hopefully then leading into Q2, big presentation and progress made at the annual conference. And so we see the cycle repeat. And I think with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Neil Fitzgerald from the British Library.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. As Tom says, I'm Neil Fitzgerald from British Library. And just looking at what comes next. So keeping in mind that very useful annual planning and delivery cycle, this strategy that has been outlined will take several years to deliver. So we'll probably looking at a 3 to 5 year time frame for us to be able to achieve all of our ambitions. So how do we do that? So as already been mentioned, there's the working groups associated with the pillars, and they will focus on those really defined concrete actions. And then we will use that annual planning cycle to make sure that we're sustaining progress and dealing with any changes that come up. And then, of course, the important thing is to communicate what we're doing. So both the online and in-person conference remains important for us to share progress. Next slide, please. And then just looking forward for this year, these are just some sort of milestone points within the calendar for those groups. Where we'll be keeping an eye on progress and working through any changes that come up. Next slide, please. And an important aspect that we discussed as part of the new strategy development was the need to fund activities. And the funding is really to pump prime the activities for each of the pillars. I think there's a recognition that for larger bits of work, we may need additional funding through grants or other means. But it's a really important thing to highlight to people that we have allocated money to help us with this strategic planning set of activities. And there is a very lightweight process with allocating that money through each of the pillars. Next slide, please. And then I think going to hand over here to Caitlin and maybe Ben.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Okay, so I think at this point, we're going to go through each of the pillars and give some updates on the initiatives and then the work that has happened so far and what we have planned to continue through Q3 and Q4. So up first is advocacy and leadership. And if you can go to the next slide, Josh. So the primary objectives that this group has identified are increasing visibility and relevance to funders, partners, commercial firms, standards bodies, and end users. And then through the last few quarters, the approaches that we identified as being useful to achieving these ends are working toward national standards adoption, so making IIIF a national standard in various countries, building out a thought leadership series, things like articles, blogs, symposia, webinars, and other kinds of materials, and then targeted outreach to adjacent groups. You can go to the next slide. Okay, now Ben and I are going to go through some of the things that are ongoing here. If you were in person with us in Naples, you heard me mention our IIIF guide. So as part of targeted outreach to all of those groups that we mentioned earlier, we've undertaken this project to build reusable, lightweight outreach materials that specifically target particular end users. So right now, we have museums and CIOs finished, archives is underway, and then the plan in place now is to create additional guides for researchers, educators, and funders. This is an ongoing process. We're taking these on as the different subject area experts have the bandwidth to help us compose these. But if there are additional guides that people think would be valuable as advocacy items, then we can take those on as well. As part of the thought leadership series, there's currently work ongoing for an interoperability white paper that Emmanuel Bermez has started. And then I'm going to turn it over to Ben to talk about another publication that is directed toward endangered cultural heritage.
Thanks, Caitlin. So as part of the advocacy group, we're currently drafting a white paper, hopefully to become something more formalized, thinking through how IIIF can really help support institutions, situations, current events that deal with endangered cultural heritage artifacts. And that could be in relation to, say, a mosque or a library or somewhere else in a country or location that doesn't have the financial ability or other abilities to help kind of preserve their cultural heritage. We're looking at how IIIF can really be a leader and kind of sussing out really its the possible implementation for IIIF's role in helping to preserve and disseminate endangered cultural heritage. So we're drafting the white paper right now. Hopefully we have something more formalized over the next few months, but it's just in one specific kind of sub focus that the advocacy pillar is working on.
Okay, and then one last thing to mention, we did touch on this briefly at the in-person conference, but part of the advocacy pillars task here is to have better outreach to non-English speakers. And what we have planned here is a multilingual training opportunity. So harnessing some of the partners that we have in non-English speaking countries to do IIIF training that is aimed toward end users. So we have some technical training for people who need to get deep with the IIIF APIs, but we don't really have a cache of training that is specific to researchers and educators and people who want to use IIIF resources but don't really know how. So the plan here is to create some trainings that are brief and recorded, and then hopefully have those available to people to access, but also to do some translation on those so that they're available to people who are not speaking the languages that we already have a lot of uptake on. So there's IIIF training in French that we have. There's trainings that is going on right now in Belgium, but we have a whole suite of other languages that we know we just don't have materials for. So that is something that is underway now and hopefully something that we'll have in place for 2024. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to talk about the technical development. If you go on to the next slide. So the technical development is all as Tom mentioned, but our kind of main purpose is to quadruple the number of compatible systems that are using IIIF, and we're tackling this in a number of ways. So the first one is to support the software community more generally, and then also to have a location where we can have a technical conference to talk further about how we can work together and create these kind of different technical solutions together. I'll note that the exec members are Mike Appleby, Antoine, and myself. We're quite a small group, so we would welcome any assistance from the community if you're interested in joining us in any of their kind of monitoring meetings. We meet about once a month, and Dawn, Childress, and Julian have been helping us out. So if you are interested in kind of keeping a handle on what's going on this side, please reach out to me and we'll get you added onto the group. So if you can go to the next slide. So as well as kind of reaching out for the communities, a lot of the software relies on the standards which are available. And there's been huge progress this year on various standards in the IIIF community. The 3D group are particularly making loads of progress in Naples and also online. The Maps group has done a fantastic job and have already released 2 extensions. The cookbooks, which is a collection of volunteers who are writing kind of documentation about how to implement IIIF. This has been going for a number of years, and it's great to see different people contributing to different recipes. And if we can include that and increase that, I think that's going to make support for development of new software easier. The search group are looking to support AV. They're having active discussions at the moment. Authentication recently released a new version of the specification to cover AV, and they're now looking at protecting manifests and annotations. And so all of this kind of spec work is ongoing, which kind of underlies a lot of the software development. But if we go on to the next slide, The actual practical work we're trying to do to kind of increase the different type of tools are available is kind of multi-level. The first one is to support the IIIF Commons group. And this is a group of volunteers which are actively looking at collaborating to create shared software. The group has created their first bit of software called the Thumbnail Panel. And this was released just before the Naples conference. And this is something that, so when you go to the Universal Viewer or Clover or Mirador, any of the viewers, when you're looking at manifest, there's a kind of a line of thumbnails. And so this component is for that particular part there, and hopefully can lower the barrier to creating new viewers, new kind of views on IIIF content. We met yesterday, and we're going to look at the IIIF Commons website to make it kind of more accessible, and also provide a method for people to suggest ideas about what kind of components they'd like to see, and try and gather volunteers so we can do new efforts and develop new tools, which ideally will work for all viewers and will kind of lower the cost of development. Alongside that, we're also doing outreach to tool developers. So I mentioned previously there was a survey that we released, and I'll go through the results of that. But we're trying to identify what key bits of infrastructure are in the IIIF community. And once we've identified those key bits of infrastructure, how can we make sure that these components are maintained, they've got a good number of developers behind it, and make sure that we're relying on tools which are continuing to be developed. So Cantaloupe is one issue that we're kind of monitoring and working with to see if we can kind of improve the maintenance and keep it going. Mirador is another one. It's great to see all the extra work at the conference with the upgrade, the React upgrade work led by Harvard, and seeing that kind of continue to be developed is really important. The Internet Archive, we've been working with the Internet Archive. It's a great location, particularly for the training, but I know lots of other people use it as well as a place to kind of host their assets and make them available as IIIF. And a community of IIIF community members are working on being able to publish version 3 manifest with AV content with the Internet Archive, which will be to a community benefit when that work's completed. And then on the meeting front, so we're looking at, we've submitted a workshop for the Europeana Tech Conference, which will be in The Hague in October. And that's going to be a tech-focused day where, again, we're trying to initiate the kind of IIIF Commons discussions and see if we can get together people which are interested in developing shared tooling. And then we're thinking about a US event in 2024, and we'll share more details on that discussion. So I'm going to the next slide. This is just a look at some of the results of the survey. So one of the questions we asked was which IIIF compliant image server you use. And it's been really interesting contrasting this to previous years as different image servers become more popular over time. But the latest response is Cantaloupe is taken over as the most popular image server, which kind of validates our kind of looking at the maintenance of that one in particular. But there are new entrants into the image server market, including serverless IIIF and lots of different options. So it's great to kind of see the different tools which are coming in and see what people are using. If we can go into the next one, this is looking at IIIF compliant viewers. So it's quite even between Mirador and Universal Viewer. And yet there are new viewers coming around all the time, like Clover and Anona. So it's good to see them represented. There seems to be quite a few viewers that are using custom OpenSeaDragon type interfaces. And so maybe the IIIF Commons and the thumbnail panel might make that sort of development easier. But again, useful data to have. The next slide, looking at the implementation of the APIs. This is really reassuring. This is not something that we've seen in previous years, but there's a really strong implementation of version 3, which again is great to see. And we'll keep on doing this every year or every couple of years, and we'll see the kind of the health of the community and what people are using. And then if we can go on to the last slide, this really, I suppose, sets it up for the next presentation, but we didn't get many people using annotations. So I can't quickly do that, but say about 10 respondents saying that they're using annotation server. So that'll be an interesting thing to look at. So if I can finish with that and pass on to the next speaker.
I think that's me. Hi, I'm David Newbury. I'm from Getty. and I'm representing the Scholarship and Community Development pillar. Next slide. One of the things as we looked into that scholarship and community development that we realized is one of the key benefits and values of IIIF is this work around annotation. We think one of the things we talk a lot about is how do we move IIIF beyond deep zoom, which is a really amazing feature, but not the full extent of what IIIF enables. One of the most powerful features that it comes with is this baked-in support for annotations, which we recognize the possibility of being beneficial within the scholarly space. And they're used often by publishers. Many of our organizations are publishing OCR of manuscripts or books through this, but we haven't seen uptake of that in the consumer space. And by consumers, I mean in scholars and people who are annotating documents that they didn't themselves create, or annotating images. And so what we wanted to say is we believe this has the potential to have value for the scholarly community. But what do we need to do to unlock that potential? The problem isn't technical. The IIIF spec meets that. It is, what do we need to do to make this possible, and how do we keep that sustainable? So I'm joined with a bunch of other exec members from Cornell and Harvard and Northwestern who are also interested in having these conversations and help put this together. Next slide. Our sense is that there's a clear user need, which is to share annotations on a small number of images from many sources between scholars for review and comment as part of a collaborative working process, which is one of those clearly workshop sentences that talks about what we're trying to do here. But what it really means is we see this need, and it's typically supported via PowerPoint right now in the research we did, for people to say, oh, I've got this image and this image, and I want to show with arrows this part and this part. And I want to send that to my colleague because we're having a discussion and I want them to look at something. And variants of that kind of conversation happen all the time in practice. And it's something that IIIF is explicitly designed to be able to support. But there's nothing out there right now that lets people actually do that thing. And one of the major barriers here is those scholars are often working with images that come from many different organizations, not one specific organization. And so while it would be possible for Getty to build something that lets you annotate Getty images, or Harvard to create something that lets you annotate Harvard images, there's nothing out there right now that lets a scholar at Northwestern annotate Getty and Harvard images to share with someone at Yale. And that's really the need that we're seeing and would like to support. Next slide. We looked through the space of annotations, and there are pieces of software out there that do annotation. But we didn't find anything that met this need. There are some very powerful tools out there that allow very complex annotation, but are often overwhelming for the scholarly audience. There are also some reasonably simple tools, but that have a lot of that require a certain amount of technical knowledge to support. The best one that comes to mind is Nikki O'Neill's work, but that requires users to have a GitHub account to manage. And that our feeling is that barrier for, an associate professor of art history is high. The best analog that we found is Stories out of CogApp, which is a tool for creating, annotation-based exhibitions. We think that's a really good model of a tool that does one thing that requires almost no technical knowledge to use, and has a very simple interface to create and share these sorts of works. Next slide. And I think the reason this doesn't exist is because the tools right now are single institution tools. Many of us are publishers, but that doesn't match the use of scholars. There are technical tools, but our users are non-technical. One of the other barriers, and one where we want to find an intersection with the software team, is that many of the current viewers don't have an easy way to load external annotations. They can do it if they're part of the manifest, but not if they're coming from a third party. And the last one is that our standard is really, really powerful, both web annotations and IIIF. And we think there's a need to help identify a set of those, the standard that meets this particular need, rather than try to express the full power of the spec. Next slide. We also talked about things that we don't think are useful here. we don't think that it's useful right now to solve fully public annotations because verifying identities of people is really hard. Same for discovery of annotations. These are real things that could be done, but they are harder problems than we think we want to tackle in this sort of pillar. It's very hard to know who someone is on the internet, and that's not a problem IIIF necessarily needs to solve. We also don't want to become the system of record for annotations, because we know from our scholarly community that that's a multi-decade sustainability promise that we would be making, and that's probably more than we're willing to be able to commit to. AV is useful, but not something we're really interested in solving. Annotating hundreds and hundreds of images and sharing them out as massive collections is useful, but again, doesn't play into that simplicity argument we're making. And finally, there's really interesting work that our colleagues at Harvard are doing around pedagogical annotations, where we assign images to be annotated by students and then use that as part of teaching. That's a really useful use case, but we're really interested more in this sharing one because we think there's complications of university policies around student work that are probably better tackled by a more focused group embedded in universities. Next slide. So in this work, we've identified a problem and the rough shape of a solution or a proposal that we think might help serve this community and scholarship need. And in true IIIF form, we think the next step here really is to create a community group to flesh this out, to really nail down what a minimally viable implementation of something like this would look like. And equally important, to create a sustainability plan for that. We've got really, really smart software developers who could build this thing. How do we make sure that it lives on beyond the interests of that software developer? How do we help work with the viewer platforms to raise support for community annotations and treat that as something that the community does? And how do we inform and bring in the scholarly community, truly make this not something that we're creating because we believe they want it, but hear from them and build something that that community wants and knows about and knows how to use. So the earliest step is we've created an annotation Slack channel to have some conversations, and the next step will be a community group. And I think that's the last slide for this pillar.
Great. Thank you, David. And thank you all the pillar representatives. This is great. So it's back to me to talk a little bit about this fourth pillar, which is a counterpart, and as Tom said, feeds into all the different pillar efforts. But this pillar is also a little bit different in that it is a little bit more directly self-reflective about the consortium's work and the value that we're working to provide. So this is about membership and value and how we desire to structure these things going forward. So the core desire is twofold, is basically to re-examine and readjust the membership model that we have in terms of pricing specifically, looking at that in terms of long-term sustainability at different institutions, and equally, or perhaps even more importantly, figuring out the model that is that allows us to have a more equitable and broadly supportive membership body. So that includes representatives from the entire globe. So maybe if you remember back to that map that I showed at the beginning, IIIF very much started as sort of a core partnership that was begun in North America, Europe, UK, and we are doing excellent work in expanding our implementation base more globally to all the different continents around the world, and we want to have the consortium membership follow suit. So that is sort of the core desire here, and to do that, to also just make sure that we are maintaining a sustainable model, so that the consortium has now been around 8 years, almost 10 years. So as we look a few years ahead to expanding into our second decade, we want to make sure that we have this sustainable model and that we can be confident in the support that we can provide to the community for years and decades ahead. So the work that we've done, and this is really partly to the work of the entire executive committee, and in some ways, I'll say the entire consortium is interested in supporting the work that we're doing here. So, what we've done so far is extensive research into peer organization membership models. So, some really similar kind of peer organizations that do digital preservation, and then others that are a little bit further afield, but that have similar kind of community and institutional support analogs. And so looking at the way that they structure their membership models, their pricing tiers, and the value propositions that they offer to their membership. So part of that has been doing some financial and sustainability modeling, looking at the projected growth over the coming years, and seeing what kind of targets we need to get to, and how we can look at that, at different pricing tiers, maybe separated out by region, and I'll get to that more in just a minute. But a big part of this too is looking at the consortium has done a good job of, in recent years, of diversifying its revenue a little bit, and so some of that is coming from training and support that we offer. So it's very critical to the way IIIF works that we don't gatekeep our training. We very much have open training modules, but we also have found success in having optional paid training opportunities, and so that's something we want to extend and support even further. And of course, looking at the intersection with all the great work that you heard today, as well as some potential grant funding opportunities to fund the core work. So are there ways that we can, say, fund the 3D development work by getting funds to bring people and get them in the right rooms together, and support that in-person work? And so basically the next steps are to continue kind of that research, and then to get more specific about it, how it will affect existing membership. Are we able to lower fees for certain consortium members? And this is a big one. So what we've looked at seems like a good model is having a little bit of more nuance in our membership model that's tied to the World Bank Income Group. Is just one way of looking at this, but basically the idea here is making it easier for different regions in the world to participate in the IIIF membership model, so that we have more responsive membership tiers that still provide all the same benefits of membership, but that are adjusted to some of these mechanisms that are related to national income levels. So we are hoping to have more details on this in the coming months. Our next goal and step is to determine sort of proposed adoption timelines, and to then start talking about this in more depth and detail with the existing membership, getting their input on and how we can grow and sustain the IIIF Consortium for, as I said, for 10, 12, 20 years to come. So I believe that's the last piece here. I'll hand it back to Tom just to handle these last next steps, but we have basically the remaining portion of the hour to answer questions after these next few slides. So Tom, do you want to cover these, and then we'll take it from there?
Sure. Thank you, Josh. I mean, just very briefly, this has been a high-level overview of where we are with the strategic plan. But the most important thing is that we actually follow through on some of these activities and achieve our goals. You've heard several of the pillar representatives have laid out calls for participation and identified ways that you can get involved. If you see anything that sparks you, or that you are already doing that you think relates to one of these pillars or a specific initiative, please speak to the representative or one of the representatives, or reach out, because what we'd love to do is plug that in. One of the strengths of IIIF as a distributed community is good ideas can come from anywhere, and we can scale up massively because there are so many people and so many different organizations if we work effectively at communicating and coordinating our work. So from this point forward, what we're really looking to do is drive progress on the specific pillars that you've heard framed up. We'll also be looking at a little bit of table setting for 2024. What are activities that we think are going to take more than the next 6 months? As Neil said, this is a multi-year endeavor. This is not something that we're looking to do in the course of 1 month or even 1 quarter. So I think that's a little bit of what we see coming up. And Josh, is there one more slide after this? And we'll open it up for questions and discussions. Popcorn, tomatoes.
So if I can.
Brian.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think as someone who does a lot of annotation work, I would wonder what's the best route for me to come to you and maybe show you some of this active work in those pillars? Like, should I come to an executive meeting? What would be the best way for me, the person who knows there's stuff going on in this area, to reach out to this group? That's my question.
At the very least, I'm happy to put you in touch with David Newberry and the other folks. I don't know if you want to add anything, David, but I think we're eager to see sort of examples from the community. And yeah, Brian, you do heroic work, so I think that's a start. And David, anything else to add?
Nope. I mean, I think if you want immediate communication, the annotations channel on Slack. I think following this call, the next work is for me to work with Josh to figure out the process for spinning up another community group. And then there'll be a call, and that's a really wonderful way to have you participate, and we would love to have you there.
Wonderful. Yep, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I guess we have a small enough group. I think folks could unmute, or if you want to raise hands, that works well too. But other questions that we can answer for folks about anything here today?
I've heard whispers of presentation API 4. Is there work going on there?
I might turn, let's see, who do we have from the editorial group? We have Tom Crane. I guess I think the answer is there is a vision of that, to the extent that there is concrete work around the 3D, integrating 3D into the IIIF ecosystem. That necessarily entails, I mean, that has to be a version 4.0 because it will be a breaking change. I don't know how much more depth. Tom, Simeon, is that a fair way to say it?
That's pretty much it. I guess in the same way that the AV work started out as an AV TSG and then realized, well, if we're going to actually do this, it needs to be presentation 3. And similarly, the 3D work is like, this needs to be presentation 4.
Yeah, I think the important difference is that the changes from the version 2 APIs to the version 3 APIs also involve some other significant changes, like the formalization of the annotation model and the change from JSON LD 1.0 to 1.1. I think that because we don't have the same sort of background changes going on, the idea is that for the things that are covered in the presentation API 3, if you're not suddenly using 3D, there will be very few changes. But obviously, there are significant additions to facilitate 3D.
Yeah, thanks both. And Dawn notes in the chat too, who is also an editor, Dawn Childress, that yeah, there are incremental updates, but yeah, the 3D is the 4.0, the big change. Other questions that we can answer? Matthias, yeah.
Hello, thank you for the update. I feel a little bit uneasy. Maybe it's due to the agenda. So you've presented the steering committee view on IIIF, which is fabulous and wonderful, and go on with it. But at the same time, I miss the grassroots, the bottom up, the community, the user perspective on IIIF. So either it could be purpose of this meeting that we get the top-down view, or maybe we have some issues with the community, with the bottom-up grassroots stuff that really drives the community as an open source community and not as a top-down steering committee for members who are paying and having something to say in the board. I can elaborate a little bit on this, but I see the time is up. So I have some quotes, but I hope my point is clear.
I think it is. No, and your point's well taken. And I'll provide a quick response. I don't know if others have more to add, but just I should have probably framed this to say, like, this executive committee work, it was really meant to supplement and in no way replace, kind of the broader community work that's happening at IIIF. This is really just like, what is the kind of work that the executive committee can do that basically isn't or can't be done kind of in other places. But I think the IIIF staff, and as you know, as you're involved in many of the groups, I think a lot of the community groups are like very explicitly just sort of responding to kind of interests and ideas that are coming, as you said, sort of more from the bottom up. And, one example is, I think there's a new group that's about to be formed, again, not from our impetus, but from community interest around teaching and learning, right? This idea of like classroom use of IIIF. So in that sense, like, it's a little bit, well, how to say, we basically try to allow the interest, to drive where those community groups go. And sometimes they end up being incredibly productive, as the design group has been with some of the guides and persona development, and others, it just ends up being kind of just demos and other work, but I think that's all valuable. So I guess, yeah, that's, we're, again, just trying to supplement and augment the work of the community rather than be the exclusive steering of all ideas. But yeah, I don't know if others.
Yeah, okay. Then I'm missing some bullet points on the presentations today, how you interoperate with the all the Slack groups and the groups who take care for specific areas of the IIIF universe. So just to put more emphasis on interaction and communication between the steering committee and all the local groups and the topic local groups.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. It's something I guess my main answer to that is that the IIIF Consortium staff is really like a central kind of navigational component to that. So we, as you know, we try to be at as many of the community meetings as we can, while not steering them, kind of being aware of them. And then we're very much a connecting piece to the executive committee, to these other governance mechanisms, but also many of the editors are involved with the we have a lot of cross-pollination. So there are many community group leaders who are also involved in these governance mechanisms. So I think we try to be very responsive, but as you know, happy to discuss if there are sort of additional ways you think we can have our finger on the pulse and make sure that the right ideas are being discussed. All right, I like a thumbs up. Any last questions? I know we're coming right to the top of the hour here. I see Simeon's got an additional comment there. And I think that's, that's an important, I think, point to end on. So I think hopefully this has been valuable to, to have a document and a recording of where we are trying to add consortium efforts and supports to some of the strategic elements, but that absolutely has to fit into this broader community framework. IIIF couldn't exist if it was just 60 institutions working on this. It absolutely thrives on and benefits from the work of the thousands of other folks and hundreds of other institutions out there. So really just trying to buttress that, support that. And as everybody here said it, I'll just reiterate, if you have any interest in this or questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at the IIIF-C staff. I'll put our email address in there. We're at staff@iiif.io. Happy to make connections. And yeah, we'll end the recording there. But thank you all for your time and energy. And yeah, stay tuned for more on this. And we'll see you at the next IIIF community call. Thanks, folks.